Hey, how's it going, everybody? If you're new here, welcome in, and if you've been here before, welcome back. I'm Rollshambo, the connoisseur and collector of all things sharp and shiny, and today I am truly excited to talk to you about a new release from Remette. Now, it has been out for a little bit, but this is, in fact, a newer release from them. This is the RT Peregrine Falcon, and this is a really exciting knife because it is a deviation from the normalcy that we're used to seeing out there. I mean, how often do you see a knife company and they're like, check out my new knife, and it's this drop point frame lock titanium, and it just seems like they just keep following a checklist to try to get you to spend your money. And it gets harder and harder and harder to find knives that truly stand out. Now, before I get into my normal flow talking about the specs and what I like and what I don't like, I wanted to mention that in this video, I'm going to show a couple things that I think a lot of people are going to find useful. We're going to talk about the heat treat. We're going to do a cut test to look at the blade geometry. And then, of course, I'm also going to test the lock. So make sure you stick around if you're interested in seeing those quality of life type tests that have been done. And before we get too lost in the weeds, let's go ahead and start with the specs. What does it cost and what is it made out of? Well, this knife comes in at just shy of 8 inches, 7.8 inches long, so just shy of a full-size blade. But I can tell you, I have no problem getting a 4-finger grip comfortably on here with my medium to large size man hands. The blade is 3.15 inches long, and it is made of M390. The handle scales are these beautifully milled titanium handle scales with these titanium pivot collars, which are really cool. I rarely see pivot collars that look like this, but you can tell that it was meant to resemble the feathers on a falcon's head, which I think is pretty sweet. This knife is complemented with a 3D milled gold or brass colored backspacer, a 3D milled gold or brass colored pocket clip, and T6 hardware all the way around. There's a couple features in here which are really easy to miss if you're not paying attention. You'll see a couple slots cut out both here on the front flipper as well as here on the pocket clip. Those are for tritium inserts, so you can 100% use those to insert some tritium vials of your favorite color. For the locking mechanism, this is a liner lock, but it's not just any liner lock, and this is where we start to talk about what makes this knife really cool. The liner lock itself can be actuated like a normal liner lock or from the pivot. That is really freaking cool. Now, pivot locks are not necessarily a new thing, but I do hesitate to call this a full-on pivot lock because it is a liner lock which is actuated by using the pivot as a button. So those of you who love fidgeting with your knives are really going to enjoy that part. Now, I did mention that I was going to talk about the lock strength, and I'm not just asking you to take my word for it. I actually went out and beat this against a wooden beam probably around 5 or 6 times, maybe even more. That being said, it is, in fact, in essence, a liner lock, which means that as far as lock strength is concerned, I wouldn't count on it any more than you count on any other liner lock. I wouldn't take this out batoning. I wouldn't smack the spine with a 2x4 because that's not my regular use case scenario. Everyone is different, but if that is you, I would definitely consider looking for a different locking mechanism because liner locks are meant to be easy to access, to be out of the way so you can't put too much force on them just by holding the knife like you can with a frame lock, but also offer decent lockup. Speaking of lockup, this one is locked up and locked out. There is no blade movement. There is no blade play. There is no travel. So that's nice. No lock rock to speak of. On the other QC item that I usually check, as you can tell, that blade is perfectly centered. This knife did not come over tightened, which is ultimately a good thing because as you can see here, we don't have a regular pivot screw. And I haven't been bold enough to try to take this one apart yet, although I'm sure that someone else has. But I do have to say that it's refreshing to get a knife in the mail that does not have to be tuned right away, right out of the box. Now, you might be wondering about my comments on the heat treat. So it's very common and very frequent that we see a company either list a heat treat but give us no evidence that it is what they say it is, or they don't list the heat treat and they leave us wondering. And neither one of those situations is great, but we do run into that very frequently here in the knife community. The good news is that recently Remette has released a video on their Instagram, and I hope it's okay because I'm going to pop it up on the screen right now so you can see. Essentially what they did was they took took their multiple $1,000 Rockwell testing machine and they tested 4 random blades from their recent batch release on the Peregrine Falcon. First, they validated against a certified test block, and then they tested all 4 blades, and all 4 came in somewhere in the realm of 60 to 61 Rockwell, which I think is pretty damn cool. And if you want to watch that, follow them on Instagram and see it there for yourself as well. Now, you might be wondering, wow, why aren't you going nuts about the fact that they're coming in at 60 to 61 Rockwell? I'm not surprised. Remette has had other knives in M390 tested before, most notably a model called the Steed by the channel Love Them Knives, and that knife came in with an M390 Rockwell hardness rating of 62. So it just goes to show, we had one before, we have 4 more tests specifically on this knife where it showed 60 to 62, but just be aware that on their website they do list the range at 59 to 61. Speaking of their website, these are currently available, although it looks like there's only a handful left depending upon which color variation you want. I do have an affiliate link, so if you decide that you want to buy one, go ahead and check it out. Use the code Rollshambo.edc for an extra 5% off, and you can get this for a cool $232, which I think is a pretty good deal. But do keep in mind, whether or not you decide to buy is entirely up to you. Moving on to the cut test. Something that I really like about this knife is that cutting geometry. Take a look at just how thin it gets there behind the edge, and it flows up the blade and stays nice and thin almost all the way to this very first flat, which I think is crazy. If you look at that flat, you'll notice it's extremely thin and it moves into this fuller, which disappears. The fuller goes here and then it disappears, which is really neat, but it does give you a decent amount of cutting relief. Now, going through cardboard with this was extremely easy. It slid through like butter, and it's got to be one of the more slicey knives that I've used more recently. I did get residue on the blade of the knife, but as you can see, it wiped right off, no problem, no scratches. But you know what? With an average rating coming in somewhere in the realm of 60 to 61, I'm not surprised because that is decently hard M390 steel, and I wouldn't expect to get scratches on my knife when you have a properly heat-treated M390. The truth is that for thrill seekers like me, there's a lot to love on this knife, and I'm going to go over it in detail. The first is going to be the design language. I understand that this is starting to go into the crazy realm, but I really enjoy it. I like the fact that the handle scales have dimension. I like the fact that this was modeled after an actual Peregrine Falcon in the middle of a dive. I enjoy that we have not only a fuller here, but a new fuller design that I've never seen before. And I'm a huge fan of the deployment hole front flipper variation. I think that that's cool because even if you don't like front flippers, you don't have to use it. You can just ignore it and use the deployment hole and the fuller, which by the way, works really, really well. Action on deployment is rather good. I also really enjoy the fact that we have very minimal branding here on the blade. It says Remette right there on the slant next to the handle scales. And then it has M390 here on the choke up point where you'd put your finger. And that's it, guys. It lets the blade do the talking for it. Look at that beautiful aesthetic from the brushed satin finish on the flats. I'm also a big fan of the ergos, especially with that 3D milled titanium pocket clip. There's no hot spots. The fit and finish and the build quality on this are actually rather good. And that's something that I can definitely appreciate all the way around, whether you're in a regular grip or in a reverse grip. And the balance is not too shabby either. The balance is centered right there around the lock bar, which is pretty standard for a knife of this caliber. And it's very easy for me to index in the normal fashion. Now, because my viewers do deserve an objective review, I want to talk about 2 things that I think that they could improve on specifically on this knife. And they're not huge things, but they are design preferences that the community prefers. And because Remette has asked me to give them suggestions and give them my true and honest thoughts on their design, I definitely need to mention them. The first thing that I would recommend changing is going to be the body screws. The body screws should be T8 hardware, and the reason behind that is that T6 screws are responsible for about 100% of all the screws I've ever stripped on knives taking knives apart. The second thing that I would change design-wise on this knife is going to be the jimping for the front flipper. That is rather shallow jimping, and it's not tightly enough spaced together to give you a truly proper front flipper grip. Now, can I still front flip this? Obviously. but there have been a few instances where I've gone to front flip it and I just go right over the top because that is a little more slippery than I appreciate on a front flipper knife. Now, given that I am not the biggest front flipper enthusiast, that's not a huge deal to me. You have to decide if that's a huge deal to you. For me, I'm a fan of using the lip of this fuller to deploy, or also, of course, the deployment hole. If you want to deploy it using your thumb, you can do that as well. So you definitely have other deployment options if that front flipper is a bummer for you. But at the end of the day, I'm just happy to see another knife company coming out with knife designs that not only make sense, but look different and function well at the same time. This is not going to be everyone's cup of tea, and that's okay because there is a ton of options out there for people that want a design that's more subdued. And in fact, if that is you and you want something that is more of a traditional design, I would highly suggest checking out my video on the Remette Wild Species, which is another fantastic knife they recently came out with that I really love as well. I actually think that this is one of the best knives released this year, and I'm going to be doing a follow-up video on this knife very soon. But if you want to check out the video that I've already done reacting to the Remette Wild Species, make sure to click on one of the videos that pops up next.